Welcome to the Newtown Big Dreams podcast, an interview-style talk show that's your gateway to the fabulous and fascinating people who relocated to start a new life. Whether you're new to our podcast or your city, our fellow neighbors from across Canada, North America, and the entire English-speaking world share their stories of reaching new horizons and big dreams. So sit back and relax as we navigate in-depth and intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives, creatives, and anyone who can share their story about their Newtown big dreams. And now, here's your host, Luke J. Menkes.
So I'm sitting here with Nathan Hutton. Thank you very much, Nathan, for coming in today.
Well,
and I want to talk to you about your coaching business and your personal story of resilience.
Sure.
First of all, let's talk about Kelowna. You came here 2 years ago. Tell us the story of how you ended up here.
So I ended up here because of my wife. So and funny enough, she came out here because of my in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
My in-laws had made the decision. We were all living in Ontario. We were not that far from Toronto. Far enough that we weren't the GTA.
Right.
But close enough that I could still commute in.
Which part of Toronto? Because I grew up in Mississauga.
Oh, okay. All right. So if you know Mississauga, then you would know like Brampton.
Yeah.
Okay. So Orangeville?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we lived in Orangeville.
Wow.
You're the second person I've met who actually knows where that is.
Right.
That's awesome. But yeah, so we were all living in Orangeville, and my in-laws, we'd all been talking about going west for a while.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of made the commitment, so they came out here, and my wife came out more or less for like moral support, kind of check out the scene as well.
Yeah.
But in the process of them looking at homes, she's a registered massage therapist, so she put out her resume, contacted a couple of clinics, and before she even hopped back on the plane, she had like three or four interviews lined up.
Wow. So
I get this phone call, I'm like, yeah, we're coming west. I'm like, okay, sure, no problem. You know, I was working full time. I was downtown Toronto working at this. I was an employment counselor and a housing worker for a homeless shelter for youth. It was a great place. Loved it. Wonderful people. Lots of amazing memories and whatnot, but it was just, I was also at a point where I felt like I just couldn't take it any further. Mm-hmm. So I was more or less 1 foot already out the door. Right. So when Kelowna became an option, we're like, well, yeah, I'm down. Like, let's put the house on the market. Let's go take a look, see what we can find out here.
Yeah.
And yeah, like none of us regret it, like at all. Like we're super happy to be out here. We're on the west side, like we're in West Kelowna now. So, but
beautiful.
Oh, it's amazing, man.
So had you visited Kelowna before?
No.
You came out?
No.
So your wife says, we're moving here. You're like, sounds good. You come out of here. What was your first impression?
Well, my first impression was just the photos that she sent me.
Right.
And
it's pretty amazing.
A few like FaceTime videos where she'd be like, oh, you got to take a look at this and like scan across the scenery.
Uh-huh.
Prior to that, the only knowledge I had of Kelowna was years ago, I was talking just in correspondence with someone, and they lived in Kelowna, and they're the same kind of thing. They just sent out some photos to be like, oh, it's beautiful here. You should come out and check it out. And it had never materialized. But yeah, I essentially packed everything up with the family and came out here sight unseen. So when I first got a chance to check it all out, I was just like, there's water everywhere. There's like the change of pace blew my mind because I mean, well, if you grew up in Mississauga, you know, like the vibe that comes off of Toronto within the GTA, it's very busy.
Yeah.
It's
very hectic.
Very hectic, like just nonstop. And like everybody's, even if you don't live within the immediate GTA, like you're all commuters then. So you have that city mentality and you bring it back to your small towns or the smaller cities that are in that area.
Yeah.
But it's always just like go, 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 go. Like 24/7.
Yeah.
So here, I felt like we could take a breath. We felt like we could just kind of like put our feet up.
Mm-hmm.
We were literally beach bums for like a solid month.
Nice.
Like we didn't really do much of anything. It was incredible because we got to check out like Peachland. We got to check out like the city park here in Kelowna. Kids decided they want to take up like kayaking and what was it? I can't. It's not wakeboarding. The
windsurfing.
No. Paddleboarding.
Paddleboarding. Right.
Yes.
That's where you stand up, right?
Yeah. So, and I mean, like, so that was interesting for me because like I'd never done that before. So it's just like it was for us. It was the scenery. It was just the vibe. Very laid back.
Mm-hmm.
It was. I had to do. It was a bit of a culture shock. I had to kind of do like a double take when we first got here, starting to get settled in. For our first month, we were all living together under the same roof. Myself, wife, kids, my in-laws, because we got here and we were still waiting for like our homes to be built or to be ready for moving in. So that first month, I think there was a big chunk of it where we were at the beach so that we could be out of the house and have our own personal space. And, but yeah, it's been beautiful. I mean, wildfires aside, that was a bit of a
and that's a little bit unusual. So this will be my 8th summer, and the last 2 years have been pretty bad with the wildfires. It's not usually like that every summer. Knock on wood.
Yes.
Hopefully. And I'm sure you were told that too. It's not that all the time. It was a little, last summer I think was the worst, or the previous I can't remember, but it was a little bit hard to breathe. Yeah,
there was, and I mean, like I'd like to think we built up a more or less immunity to, the Toronto smog. So like I was like, a little smoke, whatever. But yeah, like last year was a little crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah, like one of my good friends, he was like born and raised in Kelowna. Like the only person I've really come across that can make that claim.
Yeah.
But even he said, he's like, yeah, the last 2 summers, basically we came. Yeah. Just like
the worst
at the worst that he's ever seen it. So I'm like, it is what it is. I mean, like it doesn't hold us back. Like we're still very happy to be here. A few times had conversations just like around the dinner table or on the back porch with my wife, and we'll talk about like friends and family that are still back in Ontario. I was like, we miss them, but we don't miss being there.
Right.
So
understood. And you mentioned you came to a point where you knew that you weren't going to be at that youth homeless shelter forever. Did you find that the pace of life in Toronto had something to do with that? Like, was it a little bit overwhelming where you just keep seeing the same people, or it like keeps mushrooming? I'm just curious, like, what it was like doing that compared to here?
Well, out here, so when we made the decision to come out here, I consciously made the decision that I wouldn't seek out the same type of work. I was doing public speaking, just kind of like on the side, very, very part-time. And when we came out here, I was like, well, you know what? This is going to be a fresh start. So I could try and find another youth worker position, but I think I'd rather just get into like public speaking, become a youth speaker, go to schools, community agencies, wherever, and then do that. So I can't necessarily speak to the overall, like if there are similarities between how systems work compared to Toronto to here. I've come across some folks that they do work within those agencies, and it sounds very similar. I mean, the demands will always be the same. Yeah, no matter where you are. A youth in need is a youth in need. Yeah, a young person, young adult. There are common expectations, and there's basic rights that everybody should have. So any agency is going to go out of their way to do what they can to assist in that manner. Yeah. For me, I put in a good 10 years with that one shelter itself. Started off as like frontline, and I did like overnights, which was just crazy. And then
why is it crazy? Are more people intoxicated and going through stress at night?
Like there's, I mean, you could basically set your watch to when things were just going to get like nuts because of like last call. And because I mean, once the bars close, then there's not as many options for individuals to find like
social
food or socialization. Like we were where we were directly across the street from one of the downtown universities. So during regular school hours, clients could go over there and just kind of like hang on the library if they're not going to do anything. Like they're just looking for a place to just kind of chill out. You can't do that when it's like 2 a.m.
Right.
So we would have more people that are coming in. And yeah, definitely like under the influence of something.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for me, it was just being awake at the ungodly hour of like 4 a.m. and then trying to get home in time that I'm not like passing out behind the wheel. But then overnights, it messed up with like just personal schedule, you know, picking up the kids from school, trying to time it so I could get like a cat nap in before they finish or like whatever, get dinner ready or, you know, at the same time trying to go like to the gym or whatever. Like it just really kind of messed with my like internal clock. Mm-hmm. So the moment that I could get out of that situation and then into an office gig, it was beautiful because then I went from like these crazy like overnights to like a Monday through Friday gig. You know, I had my own space. I could actually wake up and have a bit of a life with my family after work, things like that.
Yeah.
So it was really good. But I mean, there was so much internal hiring that, I mean, it was really, once I found myself in employment counseling, you know, we were facilitating programs and, you know, at that point I was already starting to do some public speaking on the side. But internally, I was at a point where the only place I could go beyond that would be to leave the office and take on like a supervisor's role, which puts me right back in the mix of all the craziness that's going on.
Dealing
directly with youth, which I always loved, you know. But when you're a supervisor, your relationship with a client is vastly different than when you're frontline.
Is it?
Oh yeah, because as a supervisor, like if things get nuts, it's not the youth worker that's going to be making the decision of, you need to go to another shelter, we're going to find you a bed elsewhere. It's the supervisor that comes in, has that conversation. So there's a lot of supervisors that had to put up with like a lot of just BS. They're like so much where they're just trying to still enforce the rules, but they're being killed every name in the book. They're getting their lives threatened. We had to break up fights every now and then.
Would staff give you a hard time too? Because I know their frontline staff are under tremendous stress too.
A lot, yeah,
and maybe fatigue, like you went through, and things like that. So.
There were, I had plenty coworkers that, you know, even when I first started off, like I could tell from the get go, like they were just suffering from burnout, and you could see it from like a mile away, like how they would interact with other staff or interact with clients. The responses to situations. And, you know, when I first started off, I was like fresh out of college, you know, full of big dreams and I'm going to come save the world. So like first jumping into whatever I could. And then by the time I was ready to leave, I'm like, yeah, you look like you could help this person out a little more than I could. It's youth workers, staff, anybody who works in social services, they're under a tremendous amount of just there's these high expectations for them to, of course, you want to do the very best that you can for your clientele. You want to be as effective as humanly possible at your job for the benefit of both yourself and your team. But there are some situations where you just kind of feel like maybe the demands are a little too high. Like, yeah, because I mean, especially if you're frontline, it's usually shift work. You're not on a consistent schedule. I don't know how it is out here. I just know, especially back in Ontario, whether it was shelters or residential programs or even in the youth criminal justice system, it was all shift work. Like you'd have 1 week where you're like 8 to 4, another week where it's 3 to 11. Some places would put you on a rotation where you're even doing overnight still. Yeah. So your body never really adjusts.
Right.
And then
dealing with crazy situations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had, you know, for all the craziness that any of us had to put up with, there were plenty of really rewarding moments as well. I mean, I definitely, when I took on a role as like an employment counselor, I felt I was actually doing more good.
Yeah. Because now you're actually helping people to kind of step outside of the situation.
It's less about trying to find a Band-Aid solution and more about, you know, you want to do something. You know, you want to get a job. You know, you want to save up money so that you can get your own place. You know, let's work together to come up with a plan so that we can reach those goals for the bigger milestone of being independently living on your own. So yeah, it was that I loved, but it was just, I put so much time in there, and I had numerous conversations with my wife, discussions about like, yeah, maybe this is the year that I step away from it, or okay, so that wasn't the time, it didn't work out, but maybe now is where we do this. And it just got to the point where we're like, forget about it. Like, let's make a clean break, fresh start.
Yeah.
And then we made our way out here. So
nice.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when dealing with a lot of these problems are connected to addiction.
I would, yeah.
Would you say, like, people who say, okay, listen, I need to quit because it's not just partying anymore, it's like causing me problems, getting into bar fights, accidents, those kind of things. What would you say is harder for people to give up in general? Is it narcotics or is it alcohol? Or does it depend on the individual?
I would say, I mean, honestly, it's more or less just the mindset. Whether somebody's addicted to heroin or they're addicted to alcohol or fentanyl or whatever substance you can think of, they're never really going to be able to step away from that until they come to the conclusion within their own life that they no longer need it.
It's not just don't want it, but I don't need this.
Yes. I mean, like for myself personally, like I had friends, I'll come out and say it, I never did hard drugs. I had friends that did, I saw them OD, and I'm like, that's not where I want to be ever in my life. And then when I see it with the clients that I was working with, there was like, the struggle is real. You can give somebody all the support that they need, but if they're not mentally and emotionally ready to make that clean break, they could be sober for like a month, and then something could just come into their life, and then they'll spiral again.
Yeah.
So I find it's less about thinking, it's less focusing on the substance and more focusing on just the internal drive. Like, is somebody contemplating, like they see that they have a problem, or is it that they know that they have a problem and they actually want to take the steps to correct it?
Yeah.
Like I used to let like drinking get out of control. Partied through my 20s.
Yeah.
Even back in high school too a little bit. But every time that I would try to just quit cold turkey, it always fell apart. And even when I was older, like in my 30s and that, I was just like, yeah, every time that I tried to do that, it never really worked out for me. Now I've got myself to a point where like I just keep it under control. It's regimented. It's I don't want my own kids to see the worst part of their dad come out.
Yeah, right.
At home or family functions or whatever. So I mean, when I'm sitting down with like as a life coach, or when I was on the front line talking with a client, and it's like, I'll relate to them. I'm like, I'm not even straight edge. Like I'm not,
right.
I'm not this squeaky clean individual. We all have our hang-ups. But it's a matter of at least recognizing those issues that you may have, and then actively working towards making something better out of it.
Yeah.
And for some folks, it's getting clean and sober. It's getting, recognizing that yes, there's an addiction. How can I get rid of that? How can I separate that from my life? Do I have to go into a rehab program? Do I have to, get into like an AA or NA, or is it more a matter of going to Al-Anon because like I come from a family history of, alcohol or drug abuse. Beyond that, I mean, it's also just recognizing that, we have to take a moment to reflect on ourselves and just be like, do we actually want to make a change? The amount of times that I had clients come into me, they're coming down and they're just like, yeah, man, like, oh, this weekend was terrible. Like the last 2 weeks have been nuts. And, like I want to get treatment. Like, okay, great. So get them all set up. And then you see them like 2 months down the road and they're
back at it.
They're back at it. Like they're just high off their mind.
And you know what it's like, right? Like when you have a bad hangover, you're like, I'd never do that.
Exactly.
I'd never do that again.
Tequila is the devil. It's like
a couple days later, you don't feel so sick anymore, and you're like, a couple drinks will kill me, right?
Yeah,
well, it's that cycle.
Absolutely. And one of my best friends, when back in Ontario, he lived the better part of his youth as a street kid. Mm. And out of that process, he also found himself addicted to a number of different drugs. But as soon as he realized that he had a problem, he would completely eliminate that, but then he would latch onto something else. Mm. So it went from like heroin to I think it was like heroin to meth to eventually it was just like alcohol. And then he was at a point where it's like, I can't even, like, this has gotten out of hand. So he quits drinking, but then he starts smoking heavily again. And it's just like, one crutch becomes another.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's great that he's no longer on heroin or some heavy street drug. But at the same time, and for himself also recognizing that, it's made the substitutions. Mm-hmm. I mean, now he's, I think he might have a cigar after he does like an obstacle horse race. Mm-hmm. But when we were first hanging out, like both of us, we still smoked. He wasn't drinking. I wouldn't drink around him just out of respect. Mm-hmm. So we'd go to concerts and that, but we would, we could never say that we were edge because we'd be going to the concert and be having like, a Cohiba cigar or something on the way to the venue. But I mean, yeah, it's like everybody just has to, there's a moment where you have to reflect on just what your triggers are mm-hmm. and what you're willing to give up. Mm-hmm. For some people, it's just a matter of if you've got a solid support group already, then it becomes easier just to completely walk away from it. Mm-hmm. But if you're an alcoholic who's in a home that abuses some sort of substance, drugs or alcohol, whatever, it's 10 times harder to just give it up and be the clean and sober individual in a house that's still completely, totally nuts.
Yeah.
So it's...
And social circles.
Absolutely.
If your friends are all alcoholics or at least heavy drinkers or routine regular drinkers, it's really hard to just say, well, I'm going to hang out with you guys and not drink anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for myself personally, becoming a dad was a life changer because my responsibilities, I shouldn't say my responsibilities, my priorities changed. Not a perfect dad. I'll be the first to admit that. But at the same time, I think twice about anything that I do because I want to make sure that I'm the best version of myself to portray that as a positive role model to my own kids.
Right.
They've seen me at my worst, but they've also seen me striving to be my best.
Right.
But I know if I was just happily married and we didn't have kids, I'd probably still have some nasty vices that I don't have in my life because I am a father.
Right.
For some people that works. For others, not so much. Mm-hmm. But that's just that. I know what worked for me, and when I'm meeting with clients, I'll take a moment and I'm very open about like how I've grown up and like things that I've gone through. So for me to sit down and be like, I can empathize with your situation. I can't say that I know what you're going through because that's an individual process and everybody's different. But at the same time, understand that there's a part of what you're experiencing that I've also experienced.
Yeah.
And if I haven't directly experienced it, then I know people in my life that have.
Yeah. So
I can speak to kind of being on the outside looking in and how they were struggling. And then let's take all that knowledge and previous, quote unquote, wisdom and piece it together to come up with a plan that's going to work for you.
Yeah.
Or like a step-by-step process, even if it's baby steps. I mean, if somebody, I would never come up, if somebody came to me and said, Nathan, my son or daughter, they're 17, 18, and they have a drinking problem. I'm not going to say, well, we're going to get them clean and sober. Let's just cut it cold turkey. Mm-hmm. I would never do that. I'd be meeting with that individual, that son or daughter, and being like, this is the concern that your family has. Do you see this as a problem? It's obviously interfering with this and this and this. Let's take the baby steps. Let's work on maybe like a drink schedule. You're only allowed, like shelters will do this all the time. as a harm reduction model. Like, you're only allowed X number of ounces out of your entire day. Mm-hmm. Anything less than that, your body might go into shock, depending on like how bad the use was. It's like, you get it down to that, and then you do that for like a week or whatever, 2 weeks. And then let's lessen it even more. Mm-hmm. Let's find, and while we're at it, we're going to find things that we can do to fill in our time, change up the social circle. Maybe it's your friends that you're hanging out that's the influence. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a stress in your life. Like, what's going on? Can we switch this out with an exercise program? Mm-hmm. Do you like music? Do you like to read? Do you like to write? Like, whatever. And just find something that we can, while taking on a harm reduction approach, also open up some other options, so that if they were to feel stressed out, well, you don't have to go back to the bottle, or you don't need to grab the pipe or whatever. It's like there's things that are out there. I've met folks that are just like, no, cold turkey. That's the only way you can do it. Like, clean break. I'm like, no, your body.
It's not realistic.
It's not realistic. Most people, their body goes into shock. Mentally, they can't handle it because they've relied on it for so long.
Yeah.
They don't know of anything else. Yeah. So,
and I think there's a big shame component too. Like, I know when I've tried to reduce certain behaviors, and if I made the decision to go cold turkey, and then your body starts reacting and your mind starts reacting, and I start to feel guilty. Like, I was told I was supposed to, right? And then I start to feel guilty. And of course, addicts know a great stress reliever is having that drink.
Oh, absolutely. So, and like, I don't want to rag on public speakers in general, but there are a few bigger names that are out there that I personally feel like they take on a position of where, like, your life will just be sunshine and rainbows by following my program or my plan or whatever. And I'm like, no, that's not the way it is. You got to look at it realistically. You got to take a moment to reflect and be like, okay, this is what's going on in my life. This is what I want to change. How can I make that happen? And what do I have to personally give up? What personal sacrifices am I willing to make to make my own life better? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like, whether it's when I'm meeting with somebody to talk about like life coaching, or if it's I'm going to school, I do what I can to, keep it entertaining, keep it free and easy. But at the same time, I'm a realist. I'm very honest to be like, what you want to do, it's probably going to suck, especially in the beginning. It's going to be really hard, but just focus on that end result and that big reward, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Mm-hmm. That's your milestone. That's what you want in your life. That's what you want to do with your life. You can make that happen. You just may need to make some sacrifices along the way.
Right. What was it in your past that made you interested in these topics? Like, what made you say, I'm going to go downtown Toronto and work with homeless and troubled youth in the middle of the night?
In the middle of the night, yeah. It was, so, I mean, my whole path towards getting into youth work, like to become a child and youth worker, really had to go back to, first, in high school, I lived with a lot of anger and a lot of depression. I dealt with a lot of just really terrible bullying.
Through high school?
Through high school. I mean, through elementary as well, but it got really bad in high school. And it was in high school that I was old enough to kind of really pick up on some of the Band-Aid solutions that were out there. So
can you give us an example?
Yeah, no problem. So like
a Band-Aid solution.
Band-Aid solution. Well, I mean, like when I was in high school, that I was living in rural Ontario, area called Huron County, and some amazing people that are out there. But it is essentially, it was an area of just farming communities. So they're spaced out. Some places would have a population of like 1,000, maybe 1,500. Some places were as small as a population of like 75 people total. So as a teen, you're going to high school where everybody's able to meet together, but then at the end of the day, you're hopping on the bus, you go back home, and it could feel like a bit of a dead zone. You don't have any friends. It could be very isolating. Mm-hmm. And where I lived, it was one of the bigger towns within the area, but my peers and myself, we didn't necessarily see eye to eye.
Mm-hmm.
So I got bullied on a regular basis. And like when I'm like, wasn't just like name calling, like I had spit on me. I had people like throwing like rocks and trash at me. People that would just, and grown adults that were just talking so much garbage about my just entire family. It was really heavy to take on. So, I mean, the first things that I was able to kind of get my hands on would have been, really at the very beginning, it wasn't even getting into like any kind of drugs or alcohol. I got an adrenaline rush from shoplifting. Wow. So I would, and to be honest, we were financially struggling. So I would go in and find out what people wanted and then get it for them and then get some sort of reimbursement. Sometimes it would be cash money. Other times it would just be like somebody who was older that could get me like a pack of smokes or whatever, or 6-pack or whatever. There was this kind of like trade and barter system.
Yeah.
But my initial rush, like I felt like I was actually doing something, came from stealing.
The recognition.
The rush of going in, the rush of not getting caught. My parents got wise to it after a while because when I felt like I was comfortable with it, I would just go and get stuff for myself. They're like, "That's a really nice basketball jersey. Where'd you get it?" And I'm like, whatever excuse I could come up with at the time, like friends or I'm borrowing it or something. So eventually they got wise to the fact as to what was going on. But I mean, while doing that, then it also opened up a social circle of individuals that were dealing, that were partying. I'd get invited over, for drinks or smoke up or whatever. And
so kind of help the bullying situation in a way, right? Because it pulled you definitely into a circle.
It pulled me into a circle. It also, again, I never got into heavy drugs. Smoked a crazy amount of pot when I was in high school. At that time, not to date myself, but I mean, like acid was really big, and like mushrooms. So like there were some really trippy moments, but that in those moments it was a bit of an escape. Like you're just at that point when everybody's high, you're happy, you get along. Doesn't matter who's in the room with you. Everybody's just having a good time. But it was just like those happy moments were starting to interfere with like my grades, my level of concentration, my motivation. Like I was already dealing with anger and depression. I'd get high, but then I couldn't care at all about school.
Right. Yeah.
I'd hop on the bus, sleep on the bus, get off the bus, have a cigarette, and then I'd go with my friend and we just like play pool or whatever. Like we were truant like all the time. If I got caught, I'd just be like, okay, go to detention or whatever. But like it was so bad that exam time would come. I think it was grade 10, and my English teacher just kind of looked at him and was like, "Nathan, why are you even here?" I'm like, "Well, I'm to write my exam." It's like, "No, even if you got perfect on this, you would still fail."
because assignments and attendance.
Assignments and all of it. She just like looked me straight in the eye. I was just like, "No matter what you do here, you will not pass this course." So I was like, "Okay, so I can leave?" She's like, "Yes, you should probably just leave." So, like, and again, it's like a walkout, and the initial gut reaction is like, "Woohoo! I don't have to do an exam." But at the same time, like, well, that means I got to go back and repeat that credit. So that really sucks. And so it was like this chain reaction of just like bad decisions that would lead to something else, and the consequences around that. My parents never drank. My dad admitted to me when I was a teenager that that he grew up with a bit of a drinking problem. He would never call himself an alcoholic, but he would say that like he abused it. So because of that fact, he was one of those where he just made a clean break. He never allowed it in the house. Myself and my brother, like we were underage, so there was never an expectation for us to open up the fridge and see like a 6-pack hanging out there. So when
how about your mom? Did she drink?
She didn't. Maybe a glass of wine at like Christmas or something.
Yeah,
but
so like she was at someone's house. They
Exactly, but I mean, like
she wasn't like going to the store and buying and stocking up the cupboards.
There was never ever like a bar fridge or anything, or like a liquor cabinet in our home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was probably the bad influence that brought that in as soon as I turned 19. But my parents and some of my friends too, they would see that I would go to a party and I would just be drinking and drinking. I thought I was just having fun, but nobody enjoys it when you're stumbling around and you're being that person at the party. Mm-hmm. And I ended up being that person at the party more times than not. So my parents sat me down and they said, they had this long conversation where they're like, we are concerned. We want to make you an offer and hopefully you'll hear us out. And I was willing to hear what they wanted to say. Their offer was, they wanted me to become legal guardian, worst case scenario, legal guardian of my younger brother. And I was like, that's really cool. That's amazing. Yeah, I'll totally do that.
How much older are you?
There's a 9-year difference. So yeah. So I mean, I already kind of felt like the third parent, mm-hmm. Or at the very least, maybe the cool point of authority. Mm-hmm. But so when my parents made this offer to me, I was just like, yeah, you know what? I'll totally do this. So like, there's only one condition. You need to stop drinking. Because at that point, I think I was 18. So, yeah. 17. So I knew that I would have a couple years before I was legally of age. And they were just like, we don't want you drinking until we know that you're basically old enough to go out and get it on your own. And the other thing was to give up any kind of drug use that you might have in your life. I was always honest with them. I would come home and they wouldn't ask me in the moment. But usually there'd be the follow-up the next morning. Be like, hey, Nathan, so when you came in, you weren't necessarily yourself. You just kind of went to bed and you didn't say much. I'm like, yeah, I was totally high. And they're like, okay, thank you for letting us know. Like, we had that kind of conversation. We had that type of relationship. But I appreciate the fact that in that moment where we're sitting down at the table, that they were just like, Nathan, we want you to be guardian. Stop drinking and definitely stop going out and partying and getting high like you are. And I was, I walked away from it and I was like, could I give this up? Should I try? My parents really going to pass away anytime soon that I would even have to be worried about being a guardian for my brother. And it just, after some long, hard thinking, I was just like, yeah, you know what? Okay, sure. So I kept to my word. I didn't drink, until my 19th birthday, and I drastically cut out that part of my life that was related to just hanging out and getting high. Mm-hmm. I had 2 circles of friends. I had a group that was with like they're like the church friends. There was a local youth group that was through the New Order Mennonite Church, and that was great. I had some great experiences there. But then I also have my other friends that were like the weekend partiers or like, right. We got nothing better to do. So let's...
Or weekday.
Weekday, yeah, exactly. Right. Oh, yeah. The amount of times that we would just like hop off the bus, shoot some hoops, and then just smoke our brains out. It was ridiculous. Or just trip out on whatever. Mm-hmm. But it was just like, I just focused, after that conversation with my parents, I was like, I ended up spending more time with the youth group crowd. Mm-hmm. Which is really beneficial in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. And but I still felt connected to kids that were struggling on their own. I ended up getting into music, mm-hmm. and it was from going to all these all ages shows and like drop-in centers and things like that I was talking more with kids before a show or even after the concert, and they're there because they don't want to go home because they're mom, dad, brother, whoever, legal guardian, they know they're going to come home and they're going to be just like loaded. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to walk into that. So they were trying to spend as much time as they could away from home mm-hmm. instead of actually going there. And that's when it really started to click with me. And I'm like, there's a population of young people that need guidance, that need assistance, that need help. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was like, I'm just a musician. I don't know what the hell I can really do with any of this, and kind of left it. And then I ended up ended up leaving the band that I was in and just kind of did my own thing for a couple of years. Found myself in Toronto and bumped into an old friend from back in Lake Huron County, and found out that he was doing child and youth work, like he was in school for it. And we had this whole conversation where he's like, Nathan, you have no idea. He's like, I'm one of like 3 guys in my class. Already, that's a sweet deal. But he's like, from a professional perspective, I'm guaranteed work because there's not enough men in the field at the time that, even if I had the lowest grades out of my entire class, I could still go in and find some sort of reliable work. He's like, you need to do this. I was working at a corporate law firm in an administrative position. So I was like either mailroom or copy center. I can't remember. The money was good, but it was nothing that I'd want to call a career. So he was like, this is what you need to do. He's like, really give this some thought, look into this. And then after that conversation, he was like, you've already worked with young people. He's like, you've done these shows. You have this experience. You've grown up with some of the same struggles. At the very least, you could maybe not completely relate, but you should be able to use some of your just previous experience to help out these young people with what they need to do.
How old were you at this point when you had this conversation?
Oh, man. I was late in the game. Because I dropped out twice when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. So even when I got my my final high school diploma, I was already in my 20s. So I would have been probably 22. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 21, 22. And
I was 21 when I finished high school. So.
Oh, well, there we go.
So
yeah,
I can relate to that.
Yeah, man. So I was the oldest in my graduating class for high school. I was the oldest in my college program, which got a lot of like old man jokes kind of pushed in there every now and then. I'm like, whatever. And I'm like, honestly, I'm just like, whatever. I'm here for my education. I'm here to do what I need to do and better my life. So, but yeah, I mean, like it was from my work as a musician and all of that really got me focused in on this is what I need to do. And when I went to college, then I started looking at, because we did placements. Mm-hmm. Automatically everybody had to do like a school setting, which was okay. It was a good it was a good first step as far as like experience. But then we had to do like residential or medical. And I knew I didn't want to be in a hospital. For myself personally, that's out of all the places you could put me, that's probably the last place I would ever want to be. Yeah. Just because, again, friends, family, I don't like the smell of it. I don't like just the tone walking into a hospital. It feels very, very gray and very just kind of like,
people are in a real suffering state by the time they get there.
Yeah, and I mean like palliative or whatever, like they're there for a reason because their bodies are struggling through whatever. Yeah. So for me, it's like I've always associated hospitals more with this is where people go before they're about to die. Mm-hmm. So I've never felt comfortable going there. So I knew that was not a placement for me. Completely ignored that. So then that left me with either residential, like children's aid, like residential homes, which is not a walk in the park, or youth criminal justice, so like open detention, open custody, which I did do in my second year, but for third year, I wanted to get into the shelter system.
So open custody, is that like a halfway house?
Sort of.
Is that what that is?
So with open detention and open custody, there are homes, so a young person let's say hypothetically, they got into trouble, and they went to a secure facility, so like a youth prison. Yeah. Now, based on their behavior while insecure, they could find themselves in front of a judge who says, you know what, your behavior's been really good. We're going to take you out of secure, and we're going to put you into, say, open detention. Open detention is where you have not yet been convicted. Charges have been laid, but you're more or less awaiting trial. Mm-hmm. Whereas open custody is you were given your verdict. Usually it's conviction of guilty or whatever. But again, the behavior is so good that we're not going to put you back into secure. We're going to do a little more of like a rehabilitative approach and give you some leniency as far as like being out in society. Open custody meant that they had a place that they would stay, kind of like an open house.
Yeah.
But they had to be in school and they had to be working. Mm-hmm. If they failed on either one of those, they would go back to secure. And with open detention, if you messed up in open detention, you'd be shipped right back to, at that time, it was TIAC, Toronto Youth Adolescent Center or something like that. But it was not a great place to go.
Right.
It got shut down for a reason. Like there was some terrible stories out of that place. But yeah, so I mean, my experience there was wonderful working in that setting. But then I knew I didn't want to go to hospital, so I ended up going to the shelter. And I ended up, we had a choice of what shelters we would go to. I heard, I remember as a kid seeing an advertisement for Covenant House. I was like, that's the only shelter that I really know. So on my application, I'm like, we're not supposed to have favorites, but I'm like, arrows pointing at Covenant House and like stars and like smiley faces. And after I did my interview for the shelter, they felt that I'd be a good fit, and I was really happy to get in there. And then that was my jumping off point into shelter. Mm-hmm. So from that moment on, from my placement after graduation, I just maintained shelter work and met so many different people from so many different walks of life. You know, there's I know that there's a Covenant House here in BC in Vancouver. And it's a much smaller operation, but I mean, the issues that bring people into shelter are still very much the same.
Right.
I mean, I had a client base that was depending on the year, it was either, you know, gang related or just young people that are just trying to escape like abusive homes or human trafficking. Yeah, there were those that they were coming out of the criminal system, and they would be, you know, the judge would sit them down and be like, you know, you can be free in society so long as you stay at one of these 3 shelters, you know, and that would be mandated. I mean, we can never keep control of that, but, you know, that was their way out into society. So it's like, yay, I'm sort of free. But now
you got boundaries.
I've got boundaries. And it's like, you know, for those individuals, like I had, it was all co-ed. So, you know, I would have young men and young women that are coming out of like the criminal justice system with like no real work experience, not a whole lot of like education. And the biggest struggle was getting them to realize that you don't need to go back to that life. You know, women that were just so angry that they were working minimum wage and, you know, taxes deducted off of their paycheck and everything. Are like, I could make this much in like 2 hours if I was doing whatever before. And it's like, that's true, but you would never get out of the system. You would find yourself back in front of a judge, you know, having just this perpetual cycle. So, I mean, as a youth worker, you know, I love the experience of working with all these different individuals, different stories, and you know, anybody that was coming from, like, if they were coming from like a war-torn country, they're living in a shelter, but they felt blessed to be in a better situation that they were living wherever they were before, you know, and their level, to be honest, their level of motivation was much, much higher to go out and get a job, get an education, because they were happy.
They're seeing opportunity.
They were seeing so much opportunity, and it was just like for those clients, I loved it because you could be like, well, the job's only going to pay like student minimum because you're in high school. Like, I don't care.
Yeah,
I'll save it up, and they would, and then they'd be looking at apartments with a housing worker, and it felt so rewarding. Or to have clients that were coming in, you know, completely high off their mind, and then getting a chance to see them like 3 months later come back and seek me out and say, hey, Nathan, I want you to know that, you know, I'm clean and I got a job and I'm sharing an apartment with a roommate. Awesome. Yeah. And I'm just like, that's incredible. Like, I'm so glad. First off, I'm glad that you're not in shelter. I'm glad to know that you're alive. And I'm really happy to know that you're taking these steps.
Right.
And there was all of those moments that would make up for somebody who's, you know, threatening my life or, you know, trying to take a swing at me. Yeah. I worked at one shelter where somebody came in stumbling drunk and they couldn't stay there. And they took serious offense to that. So they tried to start a fight with me, and it made its way into the kitchen area. So like they're throwing like milk jugs and all kinds of just whatever they could get their hands on. The next morning they had no recollection. But I had to go home and explain to my wife that, that's not blood, it's ketchup. This is what happened. So it's like,
very stressful,
very, very stressful. But for all the negative things that would happen, it just made those positive moments, even more, just more memorable, and just feel like I was doing something really positive and just wonderful for the betterment of just society.
Yeah.
Never mind personal reward. It was like just knowing that person is now, that young person has an opportunity and they've latched onto it, and you just hope and pray to the gods that they're gonna stick to that.
Yeah. I would like to shift gears a little bit to public speaking.
Okay.
So just making an educated guess based on what you told me so far, I'm guessing that you're a personality type, and you're a very eloquent speaker, and you can reach more people more effectively with the same amount of energy if you can speak to a crowd. Talk about your experiences, talk about what it's like getting out of the former lifestyle. That for you, it's more effective. Especially when it comes to managing your own energy.
Oh, yeah.
Is that because you mentioned you went through some burnout? Working in the overnight situations, and I can totally. I mean, I ran a nightclub, which isn't the same, but we had a lot of the same situations. Violence, police,
absolutely,
and when you're not drinking, it just becomes kind of nauseating being around people in that state. When you're drunk, you don't notice.
Yeah, exactly.
But I got pretty burnt out and fed up, and I had small children at home, and it was interfering with that.
Yeah.
So is that fair to say that public speaking is a way for you to still help, but in a more broadly impactful?
Absolutely. That was a big reason why when we came out here that I made the decision to try and make a full-time career out of public speaking.
Mm-hmm. Did you take courses?
Well, for public, I was already when I was an employment counselor, we ended up, myself and my coworker at the time and my manager at the time, we created started off as a 2-week pre-employment program, which now meant that I wasn't just sitting down with somebody and being like, let's build a resume. It was like, I'm facilitating workshops. I'm presenting all this information. So that's where I really kind of cut my teeth.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. I loved it, because I would have at the most, 20 people in the room. But there were plenty of moments where I was also speaking to like 2 individuals because those were the ones that showed up.
Right.
And I had similar experiences as a musician as well. You'd go to a club and you're promised like a crowd of like at least 100, and you get in there's like 10 people that are just like, yeah, the out of towners are here, and it's
we used to have a joke at the club. There's one guy in the corner eating a ham sandwich. Yep. That's the
always. Yeah. The one dude that's there that just kind of turns around and is like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
It's like, I'm here for the beer. I'm here for whatever. It's like, so, I mean, doing those workshops already kind of got me into the mindset of like, I love just talking. I love just presenting. And to do public speaking out here, I didn't want to fully give up youth work, but I did not want to hop back into, a residential program or like the shelter system, because you're absolutely right. When you're speaking now, depending on the event or depending on who you're speaking to, you could still have a room of only like 5 people, or you could be speaking to, an entire group of like 100 professionals that it's an event for teachers or social workers or whatever. I'm happy with either one, and I feel comfortable with either one because it's I'm just there for a purpose, and it makes I still feel like I'm able to do some good. Life coaching is more of a focus just to be here like locally, just to build up a client base within Kelowna, West Kelowna predominantly. I mean, we'll say Central Okanagan, but you'd be hard pressed to find somebody, at least in my mind, that's going to drive from Vernon to West Kelowna so that their teenager, their son or daughter, young adult, spends like an hour with me. Like that just doesn't happen. They're going to look for somebody within their own area. So public speaking gives me that opportunity where, I can just kind of go wherever. I don't mind traveling. I don't mind hopping on a plane or hopping in my car, driving for whatever length of time to get to another speaking engagement, school. I haven't done a church yet, but I've had people ask me, they're like, "Are you faith-based?" I'm like, "No, not at all. I'm not going to like burst into flames if I cross the threshold into the church, but I'm not going to come in and speak to any particular religious belief structure." Right.
Do you pick up clients from your speaking gigs? So like a parent in the audience says, "I want you to come."
Out here, no. Well, I shouldn't say not as of yet. But when we were still living in Ontario, there were a few. Like I went to a school in particular, and really kind of hit it off with the teacher. Like, and she was like, "We need to get you or somebody like you to come back, and I would like you to sit down and talk to so and so. He's been a bit of we'll say an issue in the classroom." And I'm like, "I'll take it. I love it." Right. I'm always up for that kind of challenge. So out here, and I mean, like life coaching is still a new aspect of what I've been doing out here. I just got my certification in that back in, I think it was February. So like I'm still trying to build up that client base. Right. But I mean, for public speaking, I've gone to like networking events, and people are like, "Oh, this is what you do? Oh, well, yeah. Can I talk to you outside of here? Because like I'd like to talk about my niece or nephew." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And if it's a situation where I feel like I can't help out personally, I know other individuals within the area that I'm like, "This is who you need to talk to." Right. They'd be perfect, or I think they would have openings that they can come in and meet with and discuss whatever's going on. So yeah, I mean, I feel blessed that I'm able to do what I'm doing. Yeah.
How do you get public speaking gigs? How do those turn up?
It's interesting because out here, so for schools in particular, you need to get board approval, which is not something that I realized right out of the gate. Back in Ontario, on my lunch break, I would be making phone calls to whoever, or I would just I put up the website and I would just tell people, this is kind of what I do, right, and speak within my own social circle of professional peers. And they'd be like, "Okay, well, here, we'll do this." So at the most, I'm talking to a teacher or I'm talking to a principal. But out here, I was approaching principals and then not realizing that it's better to approach like the parent advisory councils. But then even with the parent advisory councils, they won't even really look at it until you've got board approval. Right. So if there are just a few more hoops to kind of jump through, but it's still been good. I mean, I was able to get myself, I feel blessed that I've been hooked up with the Voices for Equity Speakers Bureau, and they're more or less they have their two founders are one lives in BC, and then the other lives in Toronto. So the entire pool of us as speakers and presenters, and we do like workshops or whatever, we're all willing to travel. We're all willing to go wherever. So anything that happens within them, they would get the booking, and then I get the email, or I get the phone call and be like, "Hey, Nathan, do you want to go here?" I'm like, "Sure." "Is there a bed that I can sleep on?" Then sure. Will nice. Can I get, my travel stuff covered? Absolutely. Like, count me in. So it's been I'm not going to lie, it's been a little tricky getting used to the nuances of how to get a booking here. But as far as like similarities are still there. Like if you want to go to a school, you still need to make some sort of connection with like a principal. You still got to book that meeting. The school district 23. So for Central Okanagan, the folks here have been amazing. They've been really cool. Now that I've been able to meet with a few of them, they're like, "Yes, let's make this happen. Let's get you to speak to maybe not like an entire full assembly. Let's get you to talk to grade whatever. Let's get you to talk to or come in and talk about this one class." I was at a networking event, got talking with somebody from UBC, and they were like, "Well, you got employment counseling service. Could you come in and talk to like this class? Because I'm fairly certain everything that I would tell them, they're not going to listen to it. But if you could go in verbatim and they'd be willing to listen because you're somebody new.
Right.
And I'm like, totally. I don't mind doing that at all. Right. So like these opportunities, like they come up and I count all of it as just a daily blessing that, I'll go wherever you need me to go.
Yeah.
So it's been amazing to just be a part of that journey and be able to do that.
Yeah, makes sense. It's probably similar to my real estate career here in the sense that the first year or two, I was just really grateful for whatever I got, opportunities here and there. Now, into my 7th or 8th year, kind of snowballs because someone who heard you speak before is going to call you in the future.
Yeah.
Or someone who's going to be looking for a speaker will be talking to someone who heard you. Yeah. And over time, it's going to build. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like for the first year that we were here, because I was really doing what I could to build a name for myself. And I mean, I still am.
Yeah.
There's never a point where I'm like, I got this. I can kind of like ease back. I don't want to do that. I never want to be in that place. I always want to feel like I need to keep pushing. But it was just for the first year, I ended up doing like a video series, just so I could be doing something to build up a name within the area. And I mean, like there wasn't a huge following for it, but those that did see it, they're just like, oh yeah, I heard about it, and or I'm gonna go check it out, and I get an email back like that was friggin' hilarious, or like, I appreciate what you're doing this, and those moments of like self-promotion and just waiting for it to kind of haven't quite hit the snowball just yet. Right. But it definitely I do what I can to always promote, always like to have opportunities like this to come out and talk to yourself. I love networking events, and even when I might feel like super tired, I'll still do what I can to kind of work the room a little bit and make some more like viable connections.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
Tell us briefly about the video series that you did last year.
So the video series was Bert Hoover Pete Road to Spartan. And it was completely based around the idea of just chronicling my journey to get ready for the 2018 Spartan Race Series. Spartan, so the obstacle course races that happen, there's a number of them all throughout North America. I mean, it's global now, but I did a couple of them with young people from the shelter back in Toronto, and the year that we moved, I actually I injured my right arm, and to the point where it was almost like frozen shoulder, and I had tendonitis in my elbow, so I couldn't do the obstacles. It even hurt like moving when we were packing everything up. That hurt. So when we finally got out here, I was like, I missed that entire season for 2017. So I made a decision. I'm like, what the hell? I'm gonna make a video series, and it started off just as a thing to keep me accountable. Because I felt like if I make a schedule where I got to do like bi-weekly videos, not only am I going to be able to show like my progress along the way to prepare for the race, but it's also, it just makes sure that I got to go to the gym. I can't be like 6 months in and not have yet stepped into doing a single exercise. So after doing that series, I was probably like the fittest I'd ever been in my entire life. Right. But yeah, like it was fun to do. And, I mixed it up so that it wasn't just all like exercise stuff, because like I'm not an exercise guru. I'm the guy, I'd be like the guy at the back of the room in the class. It's kind of like, push-ups, sit-ups, whatever. I like to run. So for me, it was more talk about like my progress, but I didn't like doing any kind of recording like in the gym. I always feel like that's really super invasive. Yeah, and there's always so many other people that they're on their own path and they're doing whatever they need to do.
They don't want cameras.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like if I was working out and somebody came in with like a selfie stick or whatever, or God forbid they had like an actual camera crew, I'd be like, yeah, no, thank you. Right. Nobody sees me struggle through this, machine or whatever. So I spaced it out so that I would talk about like exercise regimes or like techniques that I was learning along the way. Did a couple of interviews here and there,
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just like, it was healthy eating. Like there was a moment where it almost turned into this quasi cooking show.
Right.
Which I'm totally, cool. Yeah, I was like, yeah.
Can we still see it?
Oh, yeah, it's on YouTube. Yeah.
So we'll post links to all this.
Oh, yeah. It was, people can just go, they could probably Google Hurt Hill Repeat Road to Spartan and the whole thing should come up.
Yeah.
But it was just, again, like it helped me space out my year. It helped me get prepared for the race that happened in North Vancouver in 2018. Mm-hmm. I'm still on the fence if I'm going to do Whistler this year. BC only has for Spartan, they've only done Whistler, and then I believe it's Kimberley is the other one. And I'd be down to run in either one of those races. But this will be the first year that they're doing that mountain series.
Right.
So for me, I'm like, it might just be a little hardcore for my ability. Mm-hmm. But I mean, at the same time, I think it would be a really fun challenge.
Yeah. And
it would be a great experience. So just got to kind of figure it out. And my kids have always been kind of like my cheerleader section. It always feels amazing to go out and do any like those obstacle course races. Like I'm not a big guy. So I'm probably like the last person that anybody thinks he'd go and do something like this. But it feels amazing when you complete that race.
Yeah.
You power through the obstacles and you get that medal. And then for me to come home and to sit down with my kids and for them to be like, "Oh, this is amazing. This is so cool. You brought home another medal." Like there's that's where I feel rewarded.
How old are your kids?
So now my daughter's 12 and my son is 8.
Nice. I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's interesting.
I find it gets tricky when they're both going on like 15.
Yeah.
Like those
we've got 3 girls in the house. 14 and 15. It's a challenge. I mean, they're not bad kids. But they got, their attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
They think they know everything.
Yes. Yeah.
Just like we did when we were
and that's what I have to always remind myself. I'm just like, you know what? I was a total just like pain in the butt when I was younger. Like for all the things that I put my parents through, well, my kids, especially my daughter, because she's older, what she's kind of showcased every now and then is nowhere close to what myself or my wife did when we were her age. So we're very grateful for that. We're extremely grateful for that.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Awesome. So Nathan, what's the best way for people to follow you if they want to keep track of your story, maybe hire you for speaking, that sort of thing?
Yep. So the 2 best options would be to either go to hurthillrepeat.com. That's my personal website. You can do bookings there. All my information is on that site. I just very recently put up merchandise as well, shirts and stickers, and because for bigger presentations I'd bring in like prize packs, stickers, whatever, to pick people out of the crowd. But now that's more or less available to whoever would want. But the other way would be just to go to Voices for Equity and their website, and I can never remember it.
Well, you can send it to me.
Yeah. But I mean,
Voices for Equity.
Yeah, Voices for Equity, and Voices for Equity because it isn't just myself. It's like there are a number of wonderful speakers that are on there, and they do presentations, workshops on a number of different subjects.
Nice.
I'm so happy that I'm a part of that group because to be a part of that bureau, because just some of the caliber of speakers and presenters that are on there, I'm like, yeah, thanks for having me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's feel absolutely blessed for that.
Great. Last question.
Yep.
Who would you like to nominate to come on the show?
I was thinking about that. I would, if I could, I would actually have 2 people that I'd like to nominate.
Great.
So the first would be Gloria Wheeler.
Okay.
And Gloria runs a business here in Kelowna called Weekends Free.
Okay.
She's an absolutely wonderful individual.
What is Weekends Free?
So, I mean, Gloria would be able to describe it better than I ever could, but it's a service. So she'll come to an individual's home or family's home, and she'll help make meals or do housekeeping for the goal is for families that they're very busy. We all have very busy lives. So to take some of the edge off, or some of the stress, I should say, she'll offer up the service to come in and then, tidy up or make, a weekly meal plan or whatever. Nice. And so they can just reach into the freezer, heat it up, and it's there for the whole family or whatever. Cool. And it's not like, it's definitely not junk food. Like she puts some serious thought into like keeping it healthy, keeping it enjoyable, make sure it's a tasty meal. It's absolutely incredible. The other person that I would nominate would be JB Cole.
Okay.
And he's a psychologist here in town. He's been working with a number of like men's groups, but I mean his knowledge and experience, and I know like both Gloria and JB, the two of them came from they're not originally from Kelowna, like they're expats. They came from, I think it was Alberta, and I think JB spent time stateside as well. Yeah. So they'd be my first two choices for sure.
Very cool. Nathan, it's been a great conversation. I could talk to you for hours. Very easy to talk to. I really appreciate your time and telling us your story about Ontario, growing up there, and brings back a lot of memories. And I think it's great work that you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you.
And want to wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. And I'm so stoked that I was able to come in and to be able to meet with you and have this conversation. So
great.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Newtown Big Dreams podcast with your host, Luke Menkes, and his authentic guests. And we love our listeners and hope you subscribe now to learn more about the amazing journeys of our incredible guests who relocated to find a new town, big dreams. And remember, make your dreams big.